Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Slovak President is in Beijing, what's driving closer cooperation between the two sides. China's AI, robotics, and innovative medicines emerge as new growth engines. Are they China's next economic powerhouse? China releases position paper on the so-called excess capacity issue. Is overcapacity a real economic concern or just a political manipulation? Hello and welcome to Road Today. I'm Anna in Beijing. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching Road Today. Our top story. President Xi Jinping says China stands ready to work with Slovakia to foster a strategic partnership featuring mutual respect, trust, and resilience. He made the remarks in Beijing during talks with Slovak President Peter Pellegrini, who is on state visit to China. The Chinese president called on both sides to uphold international fairness and justice while strengthening cooperation to improve global governance. Pellegrini said Slovakia values its strategic partnership with China and is looking to expand cooperation in trade, artificial intelligence, new energy, and other sectors for the benefit of both countries. So for more on this, joining us on the line is Professor Chu Qiang, fellow of the Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China. Thanks for joining us, Professor.
Thank you.
Professor, this is President Pellegrini's first visit to China since taking office, and it comes only a year after China and Slovakia upgraded their ties to a strategic partnership. So what does this face-to-face meeting tell us about where the relationship is heading, and what are both countries hoping to achieve this time?
I think where the relationship been heading, I think we can conclude that in three words. Number one is wider. I think in 2024, Prime Minister Fiza, when he visited China, actually we have achieved this strategic partnership. And now the president visiting China, I think he wants to actually make the list longer. It's not just a framework of cooperation. You would like to have more of the contents and project to fill all this, MOU. And also, I think it's deeper. The deeper means it's not actually been limited to the traditional, commerce and trade or the very low end, cooperation on the supply chain. I think Slovakia is actually have the highest productivities of, automobiles and also mechanics, if you count it by average per capita. And China right now are also doing very well in EV and batteries and, green energies. So I think President's visit actually want to make this complementary cooperation to be the true growth point for both countries. And I think last but not least is higher. So I think Slovakia have a very ambitious target and very clear-minded, goal that he want to elevate this economy in many fronts, especially the high technology, to welcome this new round of the technology revolution, like the renewable energy, AI, robot, and aviation and aerospace. So I think they want to elevate the cooperation between the two countries for the traditional trade partner to a, comprehensive partnership facing the technology and innovation.
Professor, Slovakia has been one of the more active European countries in working with China through the Belt and Road Initiative and China CEE cooperation. What makes Slovakia's approach different, and what unique opportunities have these platforms created for the country?
I think Slovakia actually are very pragmatic and they are very clear-minded. They don't want to shoot side. They want to have, development of their economy and have better living standard for their people. I think that's a reason why, even though in Brussels right now we have heard some noises about Chinese cooperation, but, Slovakia actually joined the Belt and Road Initiative ever since 2015, and the earliest signer, in the whole European Union. And I think they have their unique opportunities. Number one is they have, very good geographical positions. They're in the heart of the Europe, and also they're a very important hub for the China-Euro Express to enter the European Union. And also they're facing lots of pressure, but also opportunity to upgrade their traditional economy. For example, they used to rely heavily on the traditional automobile making industry, and they want to upgrade the whole economy, towards this new era. For example, like green energy, like the EV. So that's the reason why they want to take this opportunity to work this out with China together. And last but not least, when they've been working with China, it's not just working, dot to dot with China. It actually means they get access to another platform like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS, framework, and all that kind of the bigger market are awaiting for the Slovakia. So instead of having a role in the European Union, they actually can see and having a larger role in the wider market and a wider platform internationally.
Professor, building on that, this time both the leaders put a lot of emphasis on AI, robotics, clean energy, and the digital economy. Compared with traditional trade, how could these new sectors become the next growth engine for both China and Slovakia?
Oh, yes. I think this is a very good growth point for both China and Slovakia. I think it can build a synergy. For Slovakia, I think Slovakia actually are very industrialized country, ever since very, very long ago. Even, before the First World War, Slovakia is already, the giant of industrialization in Europe. But I think there is a shortage. That is the energy source. They are not very rich in the petroleum, oil and gas, so they rely on the coal, which is not very clean and low efficient. So I think the renewable energy technology can actually help them to upgrade their traditional supply chain to a very large step. And so they want Chinese solar, wind, and all this kind of manufacturing, and also itself can be a good job market. And secondly, Slovakia is a country with limited population well compared to China. So I think robot and AI can actually help this traditional industrial giant to keep their forces and keep their competitiveness in the industrial 4.0 era. That's a reason why when Prime Minister Fico visited China, he actually are very interested in Chinese, robot technology and automation. And also Slovakia, because they lies in a center position or the heart of the Europe. So they want, switch their country from just a builder to a trader as well. So e-commerce is the key. That's the reason why they want to introduce in the digital economy and e-commerce from China. And also vice versa for China. Slovakia is also a very important market in the European Union, a large country in Europe for sure. And also this position can help Chinese product to go to the market of the European Union. And meanwhile, Slovakia are very good at, traditional supply chain. They have very rich deposit in technology, in human resources, engineers. So actually, this is a very good marriage. So we're not talking about, who is a sponsor, who is the taker. We're talking about two good partners can build the cake bigger together.
Professor, we've noticed that more and more European countries, including Slovakia, are no longer just talking about trade. They are talking about AI, digital economy, robotics, those cutting-edge areas. And Slovakia has even expressed support for China's approach to global AI governance. So why are countries like Slovakia choosing to work more closely with China in these cutting-edge industries, despite all the talks about de-risking and technology restrictions elsewhere?
Oh, yes. I think this is actually a very interesting fact, isn't it? Slovakia is a builder, like Germany, like South Korea. So you will find out the truth, even though in many Western countries, they're saying, okay, China is blocking our way, China is a challenge. But all these builders, the country which I just mentioned, they are actually against this kind of idea. South Korea has been working with China very closely. Germany actually vetoed all those kind of the motion in the Brussels, which is have to, put sanctions on China. Slovakia is the same. Why? Is because we are builders. We belong to one supply chain, especially I'll give you an example like the automobile industries. This industry is globalized. So if they are jumping into the bandwagon with some other Western country to say, okay, we're going to decouple with China. So I think the first damage will be taken by Slovakia or Germany or South Korea themselves, because they understand China is the large market. And also many technologies are now in China. So if they want to build cars, they have to work with China. If they want to sell cars, they will have to work with China. So actually, China has all kinds of the good wellness to work with these countries. China never put sanction to these countries. China never say we're going to have to, decouple with this country. So why China have this kind of a goodwill and they follow those kind of the ill will to, block China, which is unreasonable. So I think Slovakia just to pick up a very reasonable and very good choices. And secondly is about, independent strategy because Slovakia, even though it's a member in the EU, but actually they don't want to lose their independence in sovereignty and diplomacy. They have their people to feed. They want to achieve their ambition and modernization. China actually proposed this multilateral world, human community with shared future. And that is within also the idea of Slovakia. So I think by judging all this fact, Slovakia chose a middle way. They're not anti-Europe, anti-America. Also, they're not anti-China. They just want to work with, the good force in a supply chain. They just want to have the market, and also they want to provide a good livelihood for their own people.
Professor, we know China and the EU still have disagreements, but Slovakia has openly said it's willing to help encourage more dialogue between the two sides. Do you see Slovakia becoming something of a bridge between China and the rest of Europe?
Oh, yes. I think Slovakia is a very sizable country in the EU. So actually, he will serve, or it can serve as a very important, connection between China and EU. And I think through Slovakia's angle, more of the, parliament members, or important politicians can actually understand why EU and China can work together. And we share a lot of visions. We share a lot of benefit. I think maybe they cannot hear it from China or they don't understand Chinese angle, but I think Slovakia can actually help them to understand better through their own angle. And I think, secondly, more importantly, is that if China and Slovakia or China and Hungary, we can work together to build something for real, to show people the good examples, why China and EU can actually make it work and why China can help to solve out lots of the problems right now are prevailing in the European Union. So I think this is actually can be more persuasive than any kinds of the talk shop. Sometimes European Union actually has been, learned or bought a lot of the Western narratives. They say, okay, this idea is good, that idea is good. But the only result I think the European Union are seeing are a splitting world, a splitting society, conflicts, a slower economy, higher inflations. So those ideas are not working. So I think maybe it is some, smart idea to give Chinese idea and Chinese supply chain a little bit trust and see what can happen. And Slovakia is going to prove that.
Thanks, Professor, for those insightful analysis. That was Professor Chu Qiang, fellow of the Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China. Coming up, China's AI, robotics, and innovative medicine emerge as new growth engines. This is Road Today. Stay tuned.
Hello, I'm Yin Liang, Kramer Chair Professor of Economics at Willamette University. In a rapidly changing world, staying informed has never been more important. World Today delivers sharp analysis, global perspectives, and the stories behind the headlines. It is your trusted source to understand what's shaping our world. World Today, bringing the world closer.
From electric vehicles and solar panels to artificial intelligence, robotics, and innovative medicines, China's export story is entering a new chapter. These three emerging industries, dubbed the New Three, are becoming new growth engines and symbols of the country's push toward high-value innovation. Data show Chinese AI models continue to lead global usage. Robot exports reached 6.3 billion yuan, or about $930 million in the first half of the year. Innovative drug licensing deals totaled around $110 billion in the same period, highlighting China's shift from exporting manufactured goods to exporting technology and innovation. So what's driving this transformation, and could these industries redefine China's place in the global economy? For more on this, my colleague Zhao Yang spoke with Li Lun, an assistant professor of economics at Peking University.
So, Professor Li Lun, China is fostering a new batch of core strategic industries, artificial intelligence, robotics, and innovative drugs, which is called the New Three. So, why are they grouped together as China's next strategic industries? And how different are they from the previous New Three industries?
I think they're grouped together because all of these new core strategic industries, as you mentioned, are knowledge-intensive industries with very strong spillover effects. Because, for example, when we talk about artificial intelligence, AI can raise productivity, not just in the computer science sector, but also in almost every sector in the society. And robots basically is going to bring the artificial intelligence into the physical economy, into the physical world. And innovative drugs and innovative medicine, basically, they're able to convert advances in AI, also in biology, chemistry, and data science into actual improvements in health. So they also have a very similar competitive edge. So based on sustainable R&D investment and also a highly skilled talent pool, establishment of intellectual property, a lot of data accumulation. I think these are some of the common factors or the common components of these new, three industries. And compared with the previous new three industries, including the electric vehicles, lithium batteries, and solar panels, the previous generation of these new three was primarily about electrification and green transformation, about manufacturing. But the next new three, I think they represent something different. They're more knowledge-intensive industries. They demonstrate China's ability to manufacture not just advanced green products at scale, but also test whether China can consistently generate and also commercialize and also globalize some of these knowledge, whether it's in AI, whether it's in medicine, or whether it's in robotics.
So is this simply another industrial upgrade, or does it represent a fundamentally different stages of China's economic development?
Yeah, it's definitely an industrial upgrade, but I do think, as you mentioned, it represents a deeper structural change of China's industrial structure. I think earlier upgrading of China's manufacturing is largely meaning from labor-intensive production to more capital-intensive or more technologically sophisticated manufacturing. I think the present transition is more involving converting the whole process, the whole ecosystem of research, patents, algorithm, data, and also scientific knowledge directly into commercialization. So I think we can identify between different forms of so-called intelligence or knowledge exports. So for example, in the previous generation, we could export software or sensors and so on and so forth. But in the future, we could directly export our big models, the model APIs, cloud services, intelligent agents, and also in the future, we could also export, for example, actual products, for example, a drug molecule, a treatment platform that's directly licensed to multinational pharmaceutical company, for example, if we talk about the new drugs. So I think this shift is already appearing in a lot of data, and also I think it's not just a replacement or substitute of current advanced manufacturing. It's basically upgrading while keeping our competitive advantage, but also able to connect research, connect our data, software, and also large-scale manufacturing in one streamlined commercialization process.
And as we know, Chinese AI models are leading the world in weekly token usage. So how significant is that metric? And beyond the large language model, where do you think Chinese AI companies have the strongest global competitive advantage?
Yeah, so I think token usage is definitely a significant measure because it's actually the smallest billing unit of the large language models. It directly measures how much model was used, how much actual model consumption was used, whether by a human or by a AI agent. So I think the metric. Some people say we should interpret the metric carefully because some AI agents use these tokens repetitively and also consume a lot of tokens. But I do think the penetration of AI agent alone, it also says something about the adoption of AI in the economy. And I think China's advantage in these large language models is definitely in its open source and cost efficient models. Chinese developers have made multiple very capable models available at relatively low cost, usually a fraction of the cost compared with ChatGPT and cloud. And also they have a very great flexibility and the ability to deploy, whether in China and also abroad. So this is very attractive to companies who want to customize their models and also protect their sensitive data. For example, for domestically operating companies in China, they could use Chinese large language models to protect their privacy. And also, I think it could offer some alternative performance benchmark. So if you have, for example, the computational heavy task, you could use the more cutting edge models. But for everyday routine task, you could use the Chinese models. So I think beyond the chatbot, as you asked, there's also a lot of competitive advantage in terms of the AI models for coding assistants, AI model for enterprise agents. A lot of Chinese models make PowerPoints much more capable than the ChatGPT or cloud. So I do think overall high token usage, it doesn't really prove directly that China has won the AI race or it's leading the AI race, but it does show that Chinese models have really leading the application stage of this AI competition.
And China has become one of the world's largest robotics manufacturers, with exports reaching more than 140 countries in the first half of this year. So what do you see as the key drivers behind the rapid rise of China's robotics industry?
Yeah, we can directly see, for example, the scale of domestic demand in the industrial robots. For example, in 2024, already China has installed close to 300,000 industrial robots, which is more than half of the global total. So I think we have a market, whether when we talk about industrial robots or humanoid robots, this market alone is going to allow producers to learn rapidly, to also spread or cut their production cost over after they put money in research and development, and also they could produce in larger volumes and also receive a lot of feedback from the users and consumers. And I think the second factor is that we have a very dense manufacturing ecosystem because as we have talked about in this show before, robot producers, they need a lot of suppliers, whether from motors, batteries, electronic components, and so on and so forth. So we need to have a country or an industrial cluster that could provide all of these components in a short development cycle. And I think this is something unique that China can provide. The third factor is, we have a increasingly strength of domestic suppliers, because the domestic suppliers, they're also learning, they're also improving their research and development. And after, for example, the increase in robot installations in a lot of production lines, these suppliers also learn, they also improve. And finally, I think the development of AI is the last sector I want to mention, because when it comes to machine vision, when it comes to multimodal models and also embodied intelligence, AI is the software, is the brain that could operate all of these robotics. And AI is also something that we're developing very, very quickly. So overall, I think China's robotic strength is resulting from the combination of a large consumer market, an integrated ecosystem of manufacturing, a rapid iteration from application and engineering strength, and also an increasing integration of artificial intelligence with physical robotics.
And China's innovative pharmaceutical sector has seen record licensing deals this year. So what explains the rise in global interest in Chinese biotech?
Yeah, I think, the global pharmaceutical companies, they're being a little bit challenged or also provided opportunity when it comes to AI, because, a lot of new products, a lot of blockbuster medicines is expected to be produced over the next few years. And also, I think when it comes to the development of these drugs, a lot of people are using AI to kind of, for example, to study the combination of protein to kind of increasingly make these antibody drugs, or make these AI assisted drug discovery I think what China offers is the faster development cycles. So basically, we have a large population of doctors, and also we have a lot of labs. So we could expand the so-called contract research capability with cooperation with local labs versus multinational pharmaceutical companies. And these factors could allow these companies to kind of try early clinical trials or to collect some of these clinical evidence in a relatively low cost and relatively fast manner. So these are some of the factors that could fasten up the licensing procedure, the development procedure, the approval procedure for these medicines. And I think the next test is, whether some of these medicine candidates could really succeed to become a blockbuster drug in the future and also get a lot of patents.
That was Li Lun, Assistant Professor of Economics at Peking University. More to come. EAC central bank governors reaffirm commitment to single currency by 2031. What does it reveal about Africa's push for deeper economic integration? Zelensky alleges Iran has taken part in the war against Ukraine. Is the Ukraine conflict becoming a broader confrontation involving multiple regional powers? You are listening to World Today. We'll be back after a short break.
Hello, my name is Alessandro Golombiewski Teixeira. I'm a professor of public policy and management at Tsinghua University in Beijing. I am a great listener of The World Today. In my opinion, The World Today is one of the best China radio programs. In The World Today, we can get the best news and analysis in what is happening now in the world. So please come to join us.
You've been listening to World Today with me, Anna, in Beijing. China has released an official document outlining its stance on global industrial capacity and the widely debated issue of so-called overcapacity. The document is titled China's Position on the so-called excess capacity issue. It says China remains committed to building a modern industrial system through openness and international cooperation, while promoting a more inclusive and resilient global industrial and supply chain network. It also stresses that resorting to protectionism measures does nothing but disrupt global supply chains and undermines long-term world economic growth. To delve into this, joining us on the line is Dr. Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow with the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Zhou Mi.
Thanks for having me.
China has just released a position paper on the so-called excess capacity issue. Why do you think Beijing chose to publish this document now, and what message is China trying to send to the international community?
Well, in my understanding that we are facing many challenges in such kind of a world with protectionism and some of this unilateralism. But there are a lot of messages coming from the United States or European Union to say that there are a lot of issues to do with its uncertainties or kind of unstable or unstable supply chains because China have some problems. So I think that Beijing is trying to deliver messages to the world that what we are looking at the issues of so-called the overcapacities and whether it is a real problems or just a kind of ways to express some of these, their understanding from the Western countries. I think that we are really want to say that, we are facing many problems and the problems are coming from different stages or different factors, but we should pay more attention to the real problem.
Mm-hmm. The paper says that what some countries call Chinese overcapacity is actually the result of comparative advantage, technological innovation, and growing global demand, especially in sectors like electric vehicles, batteries, and renewable energy. So from an economic perspective, is China's overcapacity really overcapacity, or has the debate become more political than economic?
Well, I agree that, when we're talking about the overcapacity issues, it's really a comparison between the demand and the supply. It is true that China has a very huge amount of abilities to do some manufacturing and provide the world with so many their manufacturing products. I think that is the real good news for the world because we are suffering from insufficient supply from, the textiles to some of these electronic I think that is definitely what we are going to support the world because of some of the protectionism. The world is suffering from unstable, supply chains. So we are trying to make the supply chains even more resilient. And on the other hand, as you mentioned about the three we call it new items. And I think that items are mainly embedded with, a lot of innovations. These are really an important thing because we are suffering from the climate change and also many, geopolitical issues. So if we are able to provide the world with these new items, they really are benefited from that. So based on this kind of abilities, I think that China is coping with our trading partners to get the win-win situation. Both of us are benefiting from this trade, and both of us are really want to elaborate or trying to strengthen the trade relations between us.
One of the central arguments in the paper is that industrial capacity should ultimately be judged by the global market rather than by individual governments. What does this mean, in your opinion? And is there any market evidence for the Western accusations?
Well, I don't think that they have some evidence, but they are trying to accuse China of being, so imbalanced in the manufacturing and the supply. I think that is definitely what we can say from certain countries or just the small parts of these countries. They argue this kind of arguments to China because that they are suffering from the abilities to supply the world with those products. So in my understanding, I would say that we need to say that world trade could be balanced based on the market if we are able to provide them with lower cost or even tariff-free environment. But we are saying that world are suffering from so many costs. The additional costs are really making it very difficult for the supply to meet the demand. So what we are really need to do is not just trying to stop that, trying to block China as one of these woes like the overcapacities or other argument. We should try to make it more facilitate for the trade to happen and make it very easier and natural for the rebalancement between the supply and the demand.
Mm-hmm. The document warns that using tariffs and other protectionist measures in response to the so-called overcapacity will only disrupt global industrial and supply chains while raising costs for consumers. What's your take on this assessment? How could protectionism worsen the very problems it claims to solve?
Well, yes, it is true that we are already observing many of the inflation in the countries, in many of the Western countries, especially when they are suffering from the higher energy cost. And I think that China's supply are a good cue for all these problems. And if the people are feeling so hard to buy what they really want to have, it's really a problem for them to continue to work or trying to be employment. And this kind of things will also, be transferred to the supply chains accordingly. So if the protectionism become our kind of preview practices, more countries will follow that suit. I think that is a really problem because the WTO is what we rely on for the better development, for the better locating of the resources. But if we are not able to trust the world that we can do more things based on this, many of the consensus about the doing businesses in the right way. I think that all of us have to decide what can we do. We have to identify the specific panel chains and also need to do some kind of very tough work to deal with these problems.
Mm-hmm. Then looking beyond this specific debate, as geopolitical competition increasingly shapes trade policies, how concerned should we be that economic issues like industrial capacity are becoming securitized? And what does this mean for the future of globalization and the multilateral trading system?
Well, there are really threats for all these kind of agreements we have reached. I think that is not just because of the specific practices. If the consideration about what we should do for the global trade becoming our new consensus, that would be a problem, as I just expressed. Mm-hmm. So we need to give the confidence for the enterprises if they are really have to stick to what they believe that it is right. Like we have to treat the trading partners the same, whether they are from in the developed economies or developing countries. We should try to believe that the trade can continue not just for 1 month or several months. It can continue for next several years. So these kind of principles are really important. But if you are not able to be protected by this kind of mechanisms, everybody have to, trying to bully some weaker partners of them. So we don't want to see that, because we need to believe that the world can be better if we are able to deal with this problem and trying to optimize the ways of allocating the resources. So I think that, for the overcapacities or other issues, we do not have to, trying to use our unilateral measurements to deal with this problem. We can sit down and we can have some talk, and we can trying to raise our concerns and also to put our targets in the suitable ways. And based on that, I'm sure that we can do more to trying to give the welfare not only to the enterprises, but also to the consumers themselves.
Thanks, Dr. Zhou Mi, for those valuable insights. That was Dr. Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow with the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. The East African community has reaffirmed its commitment to introducing a single currency by 2031, pledging to deepen financial integration among its member states. The commitment came at a meeting of the EAC Monetary Affairs Committee in Uganda, bringing together central bank governors and senior financial officials from across the bloc. Participants reviewed progress toward monetary union, highlighting advances in monetary policy reforms, regional payment systems, and institutional capacity building. So for more on this, joining us on the line is Dr. He Wenping, Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Dr. He, the East African community has once again reaffirmed its goals of launching a single currency by 2031. Given that this has been a long-term objective, what makes this latest commitment especially important? How realistic is the 2031 timeline?
Well, I think this time around, EAC, that means the East African Community, reaffirm that this goal they are trying to reach actually is trying to show their determination to reach this regional integrity by the year 2031. Actually, I don't think it's that quite realistic for this new timeline, because before EAC already made saying they are trying to reach this integration, especially monetary one, to reach a single currency among all those member countries, saying by the time 2024. But then by 2024, and then they couldn't. So that's why they postponed, saying maybe need a longer time all the way to 2031. Even though you think still have several years to go, but many challenges lying ahead. So it's not that easy, saying among all those member countries and 8 more one, and then can reach a single currency. But they want to show their determination.
Then building on that, supporters argue that a common currency could boost trade, investment, and regional integration by reducing transaction costs and exchange rate risks. So in practical terms, what economic benefits could a single currency bring to East African businesses and consumers?
Oh, yes, theoretically speaking, of course, if all those member countries in this big region can now have a single common currency, of course, that would be very good for boosting the business and also, just you mentioned, all those to increase the trade among all those member countries and then building a very big single market. People even forecast, with this common single currency, and then probably, this region, East African community, will becoming by size and also by population and then by GDP as a whole, even by per capita GDP, will quickly even increasing its position in Africa, all the continent. But this is in theoretical speaking. But as I just mentioned, when you're looking ahead, and then you find a lot of hurdles lying ahead. It's not that easy to reach. If you look upon all those member countries, you will see they have different the economic development structure, and then the GDP, even the political stability. Actually, also some is good, very enjoy stability. Some remain maybe fighting for some terrorist group. So on and so forth, even conflict going on.
As you said, the committee also acknowledged the challenges. For example, the progress toward meeting the macroeconomic convergence criteria remains uneven across member states. Speaking of the biggest hurdle standing in the way of monetary union, which convergence indicators are proving the most difficult to achieve?
If we're trying to figure out which one is the most difficult one, I think probably that is a different level of economic development. For example, we see Kenya among all those EAC countries standing quite high because the economic growth rate now is quite good, especially the railway has been built and then the harbor situation has been increased also. And as far as I know, their total GDP now already rising to the number 6. Biggest one now in the whole continent in Africa. Before, they just rank as number 11, the biggest one. So you see, enjoy very good this development momentum. But if you look about like South Sudan and then also Somali, those two countries, Somalia recently joined this EAC, are still facing even the political stability. Also facing, somehow that there is one region called Somaliland, and they self-claim their independence. Of course, not got any international recognition. But that means, cut some part out from the general pie. And then they're also suffering from Al-Shabaab. We all know this is quite famous terrorist group now working quite actively, not only in south of Somalia and also goes to Kenya, even Uganda, to expand their terrorist activity. So this is also a big issue. Influence those foreign FDI coming to Somalia to do the investment. And not mention other like South Sudan, also still after, this is the youngest country in Africa continent, got independence in the year 2011. But after independence, quickly fell into the civil war between the two, fighting the group, even though now getting back to the peace, but all the development level is quite low. So you see with those different members, different development level, so it's not that easy. Saying now quickly giving several years to go and then can reach like a quite good single market and bringing the common currency because they have to meet several of these very high standards. For example, like your inflation, the rate cannot be higher than how much, and then your foreign exchange reserve should be at least can support you for at least 6 months, like import. And so all of those financial criteria, some countries easily meet this benchmark, but some members are hardly to reach this benchmark. So that is why this, different economic this size and different economic development level, and then cost quite. If you mention which one is the most difficult one, I should refer this point.
Mm-hmm. Dr. He, one last question, because many people naturally compare the EAC's ambitions with the Eurozone. There are developed economies like Germany, France, and also the less developed economies. What lessons, both positive and negative, can East African policymakers learn from Europe's experience in creating and managing a monetary union?
Oh, yes. Actually, not to mention the EAC, even the entire African Union, AU, has been learning the experience from the EU, Europe Union, because they want put their efforts together, put their, all the resources together, and then building a single market, and then eventually not the EAC, even the entire Africa maybe use one common currency. So this is a follow the EU's way. Of course, this is the right direction because with the fragmentation of all the African continent, because 54 countries is quite some are quite small, so they want to reach the single African voice and also the single African market. Of course, no doubt, this is the right direction. But the thing is, EU also facing difficulty. We have witnessed like UK exit from the EU market. They haven't been in, but even now we are facing the EU now is rising. Those rightist parties already rising. Probably after Macron, people are talking about maybe France also will coming up a rightist party. Maybe they're also out of the EU. So not to mention the political, those challenges, those party, rightist party now is on the rise. And also those monetary union, those single financial policy, all this also facing challenge. They're also facing the, the imbalance between those newly, East Europe and Western Europe, and also North Europe and Southern Europe. So those development the imbalance. Of course, those imbalance is not as big as like African continent. So African continent, even the Eastern African community, wow, you see, we just analyzed such big differences. So I think for EAC or for African Union as a whole, they have to take big these references, no matter it's positive one, also the negative one from the EU. It's not easy this way going forward.
Thanks, Dr. He, for those valuable observations. That was Dr. He Wenping, Senior Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky alleges that Iran has taken part in the war against Ukraine. In an interview with British media, Zelensky accused Iran of supplying Russia with drones, weapons, and military technologies in the early stages of the conflict. On Sunday, Ukrainian and U.S. officials discussed a proposal to end airstrikes that will be presented to Russia as part of a new initiative to revive peace talks. Kremlin said it's too early to comment on Zelensky's remarks in the interview. So for more on this, my colleague Gao Yingshi earlier spoke with Kamil Makili-Aliyev, Associate Professor at the School of Global Studies at the University of Gothenburg.
Can you help us understand the dynamics on the ground right now? How has the momentum been shifting between the two sides, and what's driving this change?
Well, the battlefield has become increasingly asymmetric, and Russia continues to make gradual gains in some sectors, relying on its larger manpower, defense industry, and I think the ability to sustain a longer war. Ukraine, meanwhile, has shifted more resources into the long-range drone and missile strikes. It's targeting Russian air bases, logistics, fuel depots, defense industries, and even the logistic economics hubs deep inside Russia. So each side is trying to exploit its comparative advantage, and Russia is seeking incremental territorial gains, while Ukraine is trying to raise the economic and military cost for continuing the war for Russia. And I think overall picture is that neither side is close to a decisive breakthrough. This remains to be a war of attrition, where I think endurance, industrial capacity, and even political resilience going to matter at least as much as the battlefield advances. So it's both military and political dimensions here.
And Ukraine and the United States are reportedly preparing a new proposal to end aerial attacks. What makes an air ceasefire different from a full ceasefire, and how do you read the timing of this proposal?
Well, an air ceasefire is much narrower than the general ceasefire. I think that's very clear. It would focus on stopping long-range missile and drone attacks against the, cities, energy infrastructure, strategic targets, while fighting on the ground will continue. I think the idea is that an air ceasefire is easier to verify and potentially easier to negotiate because it addresses one of the most damaging aspects of this war, the attacks on the dual use and civilian infrastructure. But it also doesn't immediately require agreement on the front lines. This is, the core of the idea. The timing, as you say, is also significant. It reflects the, growing recognition from both sides that a comprehensive peace agreement is still out of reach. and the diplomats are looking for more limited confidence-building measures that could eventually create momentum for broader negotiations. Another part of the timing is that the Ukraine is right now on the up of the momentum, striking the economic, logistics, and fuel depots of Russia, which creates a bigger impact in summertime. But closer to wintertime, the reciprocal attacks by Russia may cripple the energy infrastructure of Ukraine that doesn't want to see the same winter during the war as it had previous and this year, 25, 26. So this is also impacting the negotiations.
Speaking about that, some officials believe that pressure on the Russian economy from Ukraine drone and missile strikes could soften Putin's position. How much leverage do these kind of strikes actually give Kiev at the negotiating table?
Well, this strike certainly creates enough increased pressure, but they should also not be overstated. Ukraine certainly demonstrated that it can reach deep inside Russia. It can disrupt fuel production, some logistics, and even parts of the defense industry. And that imposes economic costs and also forces Moscow to devote more resources to homeland defense. However, I think these attacks alone are unlikely to change the Kremlin's core political objectives. The real value is that they complicate Russia's war effort and strengthen Ukraine's bargaining positions by showing that the cost of continuing the war are going to rise for both sides. So they provide leverage, but I don't think they are enough by themselves to force a political settlement. Russia's president have showed that consistently, that he is not willing to change his mind just because of this increased costs.
Recently, we also see that Putin signed a decree expanding Russia's armed forces to over 2.4 million personnel. So what's the rationale behind it, in your opinion?
I think it's very trivial. The decision like that reflects that Russia's expectation remains that there's going to be long-term confrontation rather than a short end to the war or some kind of shortened war. Expanding the armed forces, it serves several purposes. It allows Russia to sustain offensive operations in Ukraine, make it possible to rotate troops more effectively, maybe strengthening its borders, because they have drawn resources out of the border defense. And even prepare for what Moscow increasingly describes as, this prolonged strategic competition with NATO. It also sends, I think, a political message. The Kremlin wants to demonstrate, both domestically and internationally, that it has the resources and determination to continue the conflict if necessary. Yeah, in other words, this is as much as about long-term strategic signaling as it about immediate military needs. This expansion is not some kind of a tactical advantageous step for Russia. It's more of increasing the military to the point where it can effectively, first of all, rotate troops, strengthen the border defense, but at the same time, it is signaling politically that Russia has an ability to keep sustaining an increased armed forces in order to be able to deter the perceived threat from NATO. Because we are not only talking about the tactical situation that it has in Ukraine, but also about the more general opposition towards NATO expansion and towards NATO as an alliance. We're talking about a situation in 10 years because this increase in the armed forces, it's a long-term step that in the end should bring the Russian armed forces to the capabilities able to deter the perceived threat from NATO in the future, let's say in 10 years and to 15 years. And I think we're going to also see this increases quite regularly, especially taking into account the losses that Russia has in the battlefield in Ukraine.
And right now, both sides seem to remain far apart on their core aims. So what are the main obstacles each side would need to overcome for these talks to move forward?
The biggest obstacle is that the disagreement is fundamentally political rather than military. Ukraine insists on preserving its sovereignty, obtaining credible long-term security guarantees, and rejecting any settlement imposed by force. It also is concerned with its territorial integrity and how much that can be restored or at least maintained. And Russia continues to argue that any agreement must reflect what it sees as the new realities created by the war and address its broader security concerns, read NATO. So there is this kind of enormous trust deficit between the sides. after years of war, both sides, they fear that any ceasefire, could simply allow the other side to regroup and then resume fighting later. So that is why I think negotiations remain so very difficult. The issue is not whether both sides are willing to talk. They both say they are willing to talk, and they've actually seen the signs that they're talking, officially and unofficially. The issue is that they still define an acceptable peace in fundamentally different ways, and bridging that gap remains the greatest challenge for both the sides and even mediators.
That was Kamol Makili-Aliyev, Associate Professor at the School of Global Studies at the University of Gothenburg, speaking with my colleague Gaoying Xu. That's all the time for this edition of World Today. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. For further discussion, you can also follow us on X. It's CGTN Radio. I'm Anna in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.